Hi again. Today we're going to talk about how to keep your reptiles safe from your other pets. Maybe you have a cat or a dog or something else. Well, we're going to talk about how to keep your reptiles safe. Thanks for stopping by.
You're watching Midwest Lizard Mom.
Okay, so let's talk about cats first. Cats can be crafty and climb. They can knock things over. So if you have a cat, you're going to want to do some things to keep your reptiles and your cat safe so that they can coexist. Okay, so let's talk about the risks of cats and reptiles. Now, cats could scratch your reptile and cause an infection, or scratch or bite or accidentally remove a limb or appendage. They also could jump onto the enclosure and fall through the mesh. For example, gecko enclosures. I've noticed a couple times on forums where people said that their gecko enclosure was caved in because their cat jumped on it and then they couldn't find their gecko. So they don't know if the cat ate it or if the gecko got away. But we're going to talk about how to make that safe so that the cat can't do that. But that's one of the risks, is them falling in. The other thing is, since cats like to knock things off, they could knock off the lighting and it could break, and then you'd have lighting shards, pieces everywhere. So you want to make sure that you're securing that lighting fixture on top of the enclosure so that it doesn't get knocked off. You may like the warmth of the heating that you're using. So I know some people might use heating panels when they have like a snake or another reptile that doesn't need the overhead heat. They might have just like a heating panel on the side that radiates heat so that one side is still warm, heating pad underneath, heating lights. So cats might be drawn to that when it's chilly inside because they will say, hey, this is a warm area, I want to hang out here. So that could be a risk for them. And you don't want them to get burned. You don't want them to knock it off. It just wouldn't be great for them either. Okay, so next let's talk about possible solutions. There are these little pokey mats that you can put on top of the enclosure that if they jump on it, then they'll be like, ow, that hurts, and then they'll jump off. There are two problems with that. One, you're hurting the cat because you're making them land on something that then will hurt their feet, and that's not nice to them. The other thing is that it doesn't stop them from getting on the enclosure in the first place. So it's not very proactive. In fact, it's not at all. It just makes them want to get off. So they could still very well jump in, cave it in, jump off, and then it didn't do anything for you at all. And it also hurt both parties. So I wouldn't do a scat mat. If you see them, just don't do it. I know sometimes people spray like water at their cat if they're on something they shouldn't be. A couple problems with that. If you're spraying at the enclosure and there's heat or another electronic device, you could be potentially causing a fire or electrical issue by spraying it. I just wouldn't do that. I would not spray water at your cat if they're by the enclosure. Again, it also isn't much of a deterrent if they already get on the enclosure. So not really a great method. I wouldn't do it. Another option is having the enclosure in a separate room where you can close the door. Now, there can be a couple of downsides to this. One, if the door gets left open, the cat can still get inside. Two, if your cat can open doors, believe it or not, there are cats out there that can open doors. I was staying at a friend's house where the cat could jump up on the doorknob and swing itself to open the door. Gradually, they would move it and the door would open. And this was a round doorknob. It was not one that was the one where you just pull down. They could actually open the door. The owner had locks on all of the rooms so that if somebody wanted to be by themselves and truly be by themselves and not have a cat walk in, they could do that. And I heard the cat, or actually two cats, I heard the cats do this multiple times. So it's something that could happen. They could very well open the door. One solution that I really like is putting a hood on top of the enclosure. So there are some enclosure companies that have spacers. So if you have more than one enclosure, there'll be a spacer that has doors that you can reach the lighting and all of that. So you're able to stack the enclosures, but then you still have the top one that you need to deal with. So that's that's something you'd have to address. I've tried to find multiple companies, but the only company that I found that has an actual hood that has a top, around, so it completely sits on top of it, and then there's a hood, so there's an actual top, it's not open. One of the companies that does that, the one that I found, is Custom Reptile Habitats, and that's actually the habitat that I use for my bearded dragon. I'm not sponsored, nobody's sponsoring me, but I wanted to mention that because it's a good sturdy enclosure, and the hood would fit on top of that, and it has a top to it. They also have, with the version that I got anyway, they have a top that goes on top. If you wanted to have it covered to keep more heat in, you could also use that as a way to kind of keep the animals and things from getting into the enclosure. But the hood, I think, would be your best option. So I would go with a hood if you have that kind of enclosure. If you haven't gotten your Reptiles lifetime enclosure, Custom Reptile Habitats, in my opinion, they're great. They're sturdy. They're well made. I've had one for my bearded dragon since he was old enough, at least a couple of years. So they're a good enclosure. I really like them, and the UVB can get through really well. The holes of the screen are pretty good sized, but you could definitely get one of their hoods to put on top. I only have reptiles, so I don't have to worry about cats or dogs or anything else trying to get in the enclosure. But if I did, I would definitely get a hood. Now, if you don't have a Custom Reptile Habitat enclosure, I wouldn't just buy one of their hoods, because even though reptile enclosures might all say they're 4x2x2, there could be some slight measurements that are off, or it might not sit on it very well. You don't want anything shifting, because then that would be a huge danger as well. Now, I know that there are companies that have spacers. Maybe you could put something on top of the spacer if it was the top one. Maybe you could make your own top for it. That's something you would just have to decide if you want to try to go that route. I don't have that need, but just something to be aware of is there are other companies that have, spacers. If you were to stack them, they just don't have hoods. And you can always ask. I think the more people ask, the more companies might discover that, wait, this might be a need. Maybe having a hood would be good, so that they can keep other animals out or keep things tucked away so things don't get into the lighting area. And I might get a hood at some point. I just don't need it because I only have reptiles. So also, if you have a snake, Custom Reptile Habitats has a new enclosure. I think it's called an SE2 or something. It's a 3x2x2, I believe. If I'm wrong, I'll put measurements here. They have an enclosure that is made for snakes, because even though it's been said that snakes don't necessarily need UVB, people are giving UVB to more and more of their animals, even the ones that they say, they don't really need it. They're doing it anyway, which I think is a great idea. So that particular one, what it has is it has like a little section that you put the heat lamp and the UVB. So one side would not have heat or UVB, and that would be their cold side, and then the warm side would be under that little area. And the nice thing about that is it's all within the enclosure. And unless you have a really large snake that needs a larger enclosure, then this might actually be a great solution for you. You can also stack multiple ones, so you wouldn't even need spaces in between. They would just stack up on top, I would think. I don't work for them, so I would say if it's something that you're thinking about doing, if you have a snake and you decide, hey, this actually might be really good for my collection, I would reach out and ask. I would think that they'd want to answer those questions. And then maybe if it is something where you could stack, that'd be great. Just leave a comment below if you have one of these and you're liking them. And also if you stack any, I'd love to know that. Right now I'm moving my snake up to a slightly larger enclosure. He will at some point, if he needs it, he'll go into an even larger one. But some snakes don't need really big, and I don't want to stress him out. So I want to do what is good for him. And that's a whole other video. But just a side note there. Yeah. So if you have one, please tell me how it's going below. I'd love to hear. Another thing that you could do to keep your reptiles safe from your cats would be to get a rack. So, and I don't mean like a breeding rack with tubs. I mean, I guess that would be, but you want to see your pets and you want to give them enrichment and see how they're doing and all of that. But what I would say is if you get like a rack system that you can put them on, they would have like wire shelves, and you could put the wire shelves close together as long as the lighting has space as well. You want to make sure you have room for that. But that could be an option. You could very well put them close together on a rack system. Now, if you do buy a rack system, make sure you're looking at how sturdy it is, how much weight does it hold. I got one, I think it was from Home Depot, and it has the ability to hold 400 pounds of shelf, which I know isn't needed. Nobody's going to get on the shelves and climb them or anything. But I just knew that if I added substrate later, that I would be fine. So no matter what I put into the enclosure, no matter what I put for substrate, if I put substrate in it, it would be okay because it would hold a lot of weight. So just something to consider when you're looking at shelves. Just make sure it's something that's sturdy, will last, because the last thing you want is for it to collapse and then you have glass and reptiles everywhere, and that would be a nightmare. So you wouldn't want that. So. Dogs, as great as they are and as sweet as they are and can or can't be, they are animals that I would not suggest having out with your reptile. So even if they're just chilling and they like to cuddle, they might be fine, and they might be fine for years, but it could just be one day something happens and either your dragon or another reptile scratches them or moves the wrong way, and then the animal attacks them. So you just don't want to put them in that situation. So just keep them apart. Now, a caveat to that is you could be holding your reptile, as long as they're not one that's going to jump away. You could be holding your reptile and it's fine. I just wouldn't let them cuddle. Like don't let them hang out and like cuddle together, because that's something that doesn't mix. So if you want to hold your snake while you're with your dog, as long as you know that they're apart and they can't get to each other, that would be ideal. If you have a reptile room and your dog comes in there sometimes with you, then that should be fine. One thing to consider though is that if your dog is barky, if your dog is at all aggressive, it could stress out your reptiles. So if you have a separate room that the reptiles are in, and if you notice your reptiles showing signs of stress, then you might want to not bring them in there with you as much as you can. So try to keep them out if they're a dog like that. Not all dogs are going to be barky and aggressive. A lot of them are very sweet, or can be very sweet, so it might be completely fine having them out at the same time, just not within reach. If you do have a dog that's barky and you bring them into the room your reptile is in, you do run the risk of, if you have geckos, them dropping their tail. Now, geckos can drop their tail for any reason. They might see a shadow, they might see nothing and just not feel well, or there could be many reasons why they drop their tail. But if you want to reduce the risk, if your dog is barky, to reduce their stress and the risk of them dropping a tail, you'll want to just keep them out of that area as much as you can. I'm going to make this quick. Bunnies are adorable and they're so soft and cute. Don't let them hang out with your reptiles. Just don't. Your reptiles could probably hurt them. They could also hurt them. I don't own bunnies. I never have. I've owned ferrets. But things like that, you could have them both out if one is on the floor. So if the bunny is on the floor, or if you have a ferret, if that's on the floor. And then if you're holding your reptile, if you feel like you need them out at the same time. But don't let them hang out and like cuddle or be on the same windowsill. It might seem cute, but it's a danger that you don't want to pose to your animals, as chill as they might be. So that's really all I have to say about rabbits. Now, birds are a natural predator to certain reptiles. When you take your bearded dragon outside, you might notice that they blackbeard and look up at the sky and look very scared. It's because they might be looking to see, is there a bird? And if they're open mouth gaping and kind of making themselves look big, they might be doing that because they think that there's a bird around. So if you have a bird, I wouldn't go out of your way to have them be together. I'd try to keep them in separate rooms if you can. Don't have the bird flying around the reptile room. I wouldn't do that. I mean, if you have something that just sits like a parrot or another large bird that will just hang out with you, that's fine. But you might want to either put something in front of the enclosure if you notice your animals look very nervous when the bird is around, or just try to keep them further away or in another room entirely. Some birds are really loud, and that can also be scary to them because they hear this squawking and they wonder, is there a bird around? Is it going to get me? Again, it can cause stress. So even though the bird would have no intention of hurting your reptile, or maybe they do, I don't know, it depends on the bird, I guess. But even though they might have no intention of doing anything, they could still be adding stress. So I wouldn't recommend it. Anyway, I hope you found this helpful. If you want to have some conversation in the comments about things that you found worked for you, I would love to have a back and forth on that. Just tell me if you have had to animal proof your reptile room. Have you had to make sure that it's safe from other animals? And what have you done? What have you found that works? And maybe what have you found that doesn't work? I'd love to talk about that and hear from you. So hope to see some comments below about that. And thanks so much for stopping by.